Hello again, indie game fans. Welcome back to I Dream of Indie. This is Old Gamer Joe here with another review for you today as we look at Sword of the Necromancer. If it's your first time here at the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button below for tons of great indie reviews and previews. Sword of the Necromancer is a dungeon crawling action RPG that will be available on the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and Good Old Games. We played the Steam version. It was developed by Grimorio of Games and published by John Doe Soft. Going into Sword of the Necromancer, I had no idea that this was going to be a love story, but that's exactly what it is, as you play as Tama trying to bring back her lover or love interest, Coco, and she's trying to do this by using the Sword of the Necromancer. This is a blade that's said to be able to revive the dead. Unfortunately, the power is not quite there, and she'll have to explore some very dangerous dungeons in order to power this sword up and hopefully bring her back. Kicking things off is a really beautiful anime cutscene that does set the backdrop quite well for players, but unfortunately that's about the only one you'll get throughout the game, as most of the story is told through static drawn images and text, though there is at least some voice acting to accompany these images. The storyline in general is a little bit on the generic side, but it hits a few emotional moments here or there despite the fact that it is told in a rather bland manner. I was invested enough to care about these characters, and I have to say there is a little bit of a nod to Shadow of the Colossus, at least at the beginning of this game, or what serves as the main hub, where you just have this dead girl in the middle of the room, a spiritual looking area, and she needs to be revived, so I think that's a pretty clear nod to that game. As for the gameplay, the developer has cited Azure Dreams, a little bit of an obscure game from Konami from way back in the day that was on the PlayStation, as one of their inspirations, and you can also feel some classic Zelda in this game too, with the top-down action. But the real twist of Sword of the Necromancer is the fact that you can revive monsters that you've defeated and have them join your party and fight along with you, and it's also the coolest feature of the game. Outside of that though is a pretty standard dungeon crawler where you'll be slashing through a wide variety of different enemies, progressing further and further through these dungeons in hopes of finding a key that will unlock the boss room. From there you want to take out the boss and go up to the next floor, which will reveal more of the story and the next dungeon. Most of these dungeons play out the same and look pretty similar to one another outside of the fact that they host different monsters. Each dungeon does have a map that will help you to get around quite easily, so you'll know where you've explored already, and as you get into later dungeons you can teleport around if you need to get to an area that you've already been to. You'll pretty much be using every face button that you can on your controller if you are playing with a controller. You can assign weapons to specific buttons or items, restorative items and such, as well as magical spells that can help you along the way. But you'll also have to slot in the monsters this way, so you do have a limited amount of slots. You can only carry so many monsters, and it's up to you to decide if you want to have items in your inventory, if you want to carry weapons, or if you just want to have a slew of monsters to take along with you. Now personally, I couldn't be bothered with the weapons so much. You can eventually upgrade them and add some statistical boosts, but I really liked collecting the different monsters. All you have to do is walk up to their body, add them to your party, and then unleash them whenever you wish, and they will take damage just as you can, but they also will, I guess you could call it, level up a bit. They'll at least rank up and get somewhat stronger, but odds are they're going to perish at some point and you'll need to collect another monster to replace the fallen one. You yourself will also level up as you progress further and further, but if you take a death in this game, it's all the way back to the first floor. That means all of the progress that you've made up to that point is lost and you'll have to grind your way all the way back. Now, initially, this game gave me quite the scare, I have to be honest with you, because on the default setting, not only are you sent all the way back to the beginning, losing all of that great progress, but you also lose the levels that you gain, which I think is just a little bit too punishing, and it almost ruined the game for me. But thankfully, a settings option is introduced the more and more you die, where you can turn that feature off so that you can keep your levels as you progress forward. So fear not, Sword of the Necromancer does a pretty good job of allowing for customizable options, including a difficulty setting, the ability to keep your levels, and to keep your items, because on the default settings, boy, is it a pretty difficult game, and it honestly feels a little bit like padding because the game is really not all that long if you were just to one-shot it, so that's a little bit disappointing. Outside of the general dungeon crawling and exploration and key collecting are some other pretty odd but clever features, I would say, in this game. The developer is actually going to be putting out IR codes of sorts, which you can get through their Discord or their Facebook is my understanding, and we were supplied a few of them for this review. You essentially just copy the image into a code indicator on your screen, and then you'll get an item. It's kind of a neat idea, but it was a little bit monotonous to type in the code each and every time I wanted to use one. They also have a little bit of a Twitch integration here, which I'm not a Twitch guy, so I didn't really test that feature out, but that's nice. It looks like people can interact interact while you're live streaming the game and kind of curse you or perhaps even help you. And apparently, I didn't even realize this till I got to the end of my review here. There's co-op in the game as well. I guess I should have noticed when it said that you can use the Steam Remote Play feature, but I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, apparently there's 2-player. Unfortunately, I didn't test that for this review, but that's certainly a nice option. It's always welcome to have local multiplayer. Overall though, the standard action dungeon crawling is pretty basic and nothing you haven't seen before, but the ability to bring these monsters into your party and then unleash them, yeah, it's actually quite a bit of fun. Sword of the Necromancer does feature some really nice pixel art. The character sprites are really well detailed. That's what steals the show here. The animations are excellent on each character, and the monster designs are interesting enough. I enjoyed them. Pretty standard stuff. You have your skeletons with swords, you have slimes. All of the fantasy tropes are here, but entertaining nonetheless. I enjoyed most of the sprite work, which is a good thing because most of the dungeons look the same despite the fact that there are different monsters inhabiting them, and that's a little bit of a disappointment, but still, I'm a sucker for 2D pixel art, and it's pretty good in this game, helped by a really nice soundtrack, some high energy tracks from time to time that will keep you invested, and they have a little bit of a 16-bit era sound to them. Reminded me of some of the classic RPGs like Lufia, and not necessarily the Final Fantasy games so much, but I enjoyed the tracks that were presented here. I thought they were well done. The sound effects, pretty standard fare as well, generic slashing, and the voice acting, like I touched on a little bit earlier in the review, not half bad despite the fact that the cinematics are a little bit lacking outside of that great anime intro. Overall, Sword of the Necromancer, not a bad little indie action RPG. It's a bit on the short side, but I guess the idea here is that you're going to die a lot if you're playing on normal and you have the standard settings of this game in place. But if you want to tweak things, you can blow through the game quite easily. But all in all, the idea of bringing monsters back to life is just as fun as it sounds. I enjoyed those interactions the best. Having a group of 3 and bum rushing a boss or enemies is always quite entertaining. So what do you think, indie game fans? Will you be resurrecting a lost loved one in Sword of the Necromancer? Let us know in the comments section below. If you have enjoyed our video coverage today, do be sure to hit that subscribe button below and the bell notification to keep up with all the latest indie game reviews and previews. Help us bring a voice to the voiceless ones by checking out the description box below. Thank you so much, and we'll see you for the next review.